Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new podcast here for the Rider News. This is called the Sports Section. My name is Carolo Pascale, and I have with me the two sports editors from the Rider News, Dylan Manfre and Shaun Chornobroff. Why don't you guys introduce yourself a little bit?
Sorry for the delay here, and I'm looking down at my phone. We just got breaking news that the NCAA has voted on November 25th as the start of the 2020-2021 college basketball season. So now that we got that out of the way, my name is Dylan Manfre. I'm the sports editor of the Rider News. Happy to be on this podcast. Happy to start this initiative, and really happy to break some news as the first on our first couple minutes of the podcast here. Doesn't really happen too often. So I'm Dylan. I'm a junior at Rider, a journalism major. And fun fact about me, I covered the second to last college basketball game on American soil back on March 12th, 2020, right before the coronavirus shut down the entire world.
All right, I'm Shaun Chornobroff. I'm a sophomore sports media major here, and I am Dylan's co-editor. He took me under his wing last year, kind of helped me out a lot, and now we're here doing this podcast together, and we're co-workers. And I can't really think of a fun fact about myself, but I'm just excited to get in and do some great work here.
Well, it's great to have you guys both on, and just a little bit about myself. I'm the photo editor for the Rider News. I came on last year around December, took over as the photo editor, and I've loved it ever since. Fun fact about me is I am the play-by-play for the Rider News ice hockey team. Just a little sliding right there for myself. But either way, we're going to talk some sports here today. Like Dylan said, we got some breaking news about the MAC starting. So, Dylan, do you want to mention some more stuff about that just real quick?
Yeah, I mean, right now we're seeing November 25th as the official start date to the 2020-2021 college basketball season. Obviously, a very encouraging sight to see. And just want to make something very, very clear here that this is all a real fluid situation. Like, anything's possible. I spoke with MAC Commissioner Rich Enders this morning, who said that we're going to have a 20-game conference slate, which is your traditional round robin. Obviously, this year has been anything but traditional. So it's gonna be a real fluid situation here. There will be some hiccups. One thing that was interesting that he told me is that they have a week in February. I think it's the third week in February where there's going to be no play whatsoever. So they plan that in because if a game is to be postponed or multiple games will need to be postponed, they're going to use that week to make up those games. However, if everything goes according to plan and there are no hiccups, however that might be unlikely, then that week, which is open for everybody, could be used to get another non-conference game in. It could be used to play another MAC game that might just not have any bearing on the standings, or they're just going to maybe use that as some practices. They're going to publicize those the models tomorrow, which is what's today's date, guys? I have no idea anymore.
Tomorrow's September 17th.
Okay. Great. I have no concept of time anymore. So they're going to publish that model tomorrow, September 17th. And so teams will get their official schedules. I think by next Tuesday, Commissioner Enzer told me this morning.
Well, that's fantastic news that we actually finally have a start date, and that now that we're actually going to get schedules for games, and we're finally going to have sports back. And that's actually a really good transition into one of the stories we had this past week. Kevin Baggett, the head coach of the men's basketball team, talked a little bit about Black Lives Matter and police brutality in the United States and all the stuff that's going on right now in the U.S. And Shaun, did you want to talk a little bit about that? I know both of you guys wrote it, but Dylan just did a whole big thing about the MAC.
I'm going to be honest. It was one of the most eye-opening conversations I think I've ever had, and there are certain things that I will fully admit as a Caucasian, as a white man, I can't understand. And when Coach Baggett is talking about him being uncomfortable, being pulled over, I've had interactions with the police. I've never been uncomfortable, and those are certain privileges I guess I get as a result of my skin color. But the one thing that stood out was the unity that's needed in this country. And I went to a protest, I believe, back in June, and really the identification of a common pain between a large group of people, it's something that really doesn't leave you and really actually changes the way you view things. And Baggett just giving me a deeper thought on that, but him just not trying to, I guess, make an enemy, but truly like unify and educate. It was something honestly truly amazing, something eye-opening, and something I think everybody, there's a video out on our YouTube channel, should go check out, because it is something different. It's not something, it's something, he just tells it to you plainly. There's no this or that, it's no debate. It is just a truly honest account from someone that has been through this, someone that is a father hoping to be a grandfather, someone that just has had this affect his life, and someone that just wants to see equality, somebody that wants to see true change, and is just tired of, as he said, is something that has been going on for 400 years now.
Yeah, I mean, it was really impactful just to talk to him, and for him to open up about, you know, what he's been through. Like, you know, we started our story off by talking about his experience getting pulled over, and that's, you know, we've seen frequently how, you know, how unsafe it is for Black people to just get pulled over, and that's like their biggest worry now. And that's sad. It's sad that the country has gotten to that point. It's sad that anybody has to worry for their own safety about getting pulled over. And, you know, it's clear that change needs to happen. And just listening to Coach Baggett talk about everything, it was very empowering. You know, you don't know what somebody else is going through. You can't. You know, as a white man myself, like, I have no idea what he goes through. I have no idea what his perpetual fears are on a daily basis. But for him to articulate those to me, it left me speechless at some points. It really, really did.
Yeah, one thing that I think is truly important to point out about the interview was he was talking about how he looks to graduate his players, and he looks to be a father figure to players. That's something he's conveyed to me privately as well when I've interviewed him. Like, he takes pride when he sees a player that they've gone on and they could be a role model, that they are now a father figure. Those are the things he takes pride in, which is truly great. But one thing also he talked about within Ryder, you know, he wants to be someone that Black people can look up to. He says, like, he had his coaching idols. He talked about John Thompson, who recently passed away, was a coach at Georgetown, who really built up that program to what it is today. And he said, you know, Black professors, Black leaders, Black coaches, he wants to be that. He thinks more Black youth need idols, and he's hoping to be that on this scale at Rider University, where people could say, I want to be Coach Baggett. I want to be like him. And that's something that we've always said we need more of. We get educated. He said it to us blatantly. He's like, he said it to us, Dylan, when you grew up, you were reading a lot about white history, not enough about Black history. And it's time that the country educates themselves. And good for Coach Baggett for great for Coach Baggett for using his platform to educate and cause whatever change he can.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic that he's able to use the platform, like you said, Shaun. And it's true that in schools we don't learn anything about Black history at all. It's almost always white history, and I would say it's more whitewashed than anything else. And there's not really any Black historical figures that you're really taught about, except for until you get to the Civil Rights Movement. And even then, a lot of it is just not talked about. Some of the major people in there, you skip over. You can do like 10, 20 minutes on some people, if that, for an entire class, if not the entire semester. And there really needs to be a change in that. And I think with Baggett, he, like you said, Shaun, is trying to be a role model, and that's just absolutely fantastic. And there needs to be more of it. And I think he's just one really, really good example of it.
He's a great example of it. Sorry, Dylan, you were talking.
No. I was just gonna say, like, you know, he's a great role model, and many people do look up to him for sure.
Yeah, and he's also going above and beyond. I'm not trying to over talk too much on this, but I think it's important to educate people as much as what we talked about, because I believe, Dylan, I don't know how many more important stories me and you will write in our lifetime than the one we just published. Truly, I think it's the most impactful story I've ever written.
I agree. I agree with that 100%. I really, really do.
And he said he has organized Zoom calls with almost all of the other programs within Rider Athletics to educate, to talk, to keep these conversations going. And I talked to Coach Inverso not too long ago, and he's told me, he's like, it's a dialogue he keeps up with his team. He says, don't just put it on social media. He's like, walk your walk, talk your talk, promote. He's like, if you're going to put it on social media, that's cool. Promote it, but also don't just promote yourselves. Promote Black Lives Matter, but then also go into the community and make a difference. He's got an initiative with the youth in Trenton where he works with the underserved kids, where he's helped 7 kids go play college soccer. He told me about 1 kid got sent to prison. 1 guy is playing professionally over in England, and that's something he's trying to take nationally to make a national difference. So kids who in a sport traditionally don't get served and really are ostracized now can hopefully have this platform to where they can get opportunities, to where honestly it's going to be run by college coaches. Now you're networking with college coaches from the time you're 9 and 10 years old, and hopefully that can launch you into a Division I, Division II school and really give you a future. We need more of that. And Inverso said Coach Baggett has been a great aid to him in this, in advice and in different things. Though we need more of that initiative by Coach Inverso, that willingness to say, okay, I've done this for 14 years. He identifies that we don't have a fall sport, so this is the time to move it. And he's talked to 25 coaches and gotten really good responses from some huge universities. Penn State, Northwestern, Maryland. Penn State, Northwestern, 2 different parts of the country. So now you could hopefully have this initiative growing in 2 different places, and that would be huge for the future of soccer, but also the Black movement within the game, where you are hoping to see a change and even more Black idols, as there are big issues going on with racism overseas within the sport.
I think that it's just fantastic for Inverso to get involved in it as well, and have Baggett as really an aid to help educate not just at Rider but nationally and even going worldwide. I think that it really needs to be spread out, and what Inverso's doing is incredible. It's absolutely insane. It's insane that he's been able to pull it off, and it's fantastic. And I think that actually is a good talking point over to what Inverso had to say this week, and what you guys wrote about him this week. But with his go ahead.
Yeah, what we wrote about him this week, it was this, I referenced it. It was his initiative. It is what he's trying to take nationwide, and this is something I've experienced personally within soccer. I know the costs that come with it. I've played travel soccer. I played for some pretty good academies myself. I had some injuries and some issues where I didn't go and play college. I chose not to, but it's a lot of money. Like, I was a goalkeeper. I had private goalkeeper training. You have to buy gloves. Cleats are expensive. League fees. Academies can cost $2,000 a year. For underserved youth, that's a big problem. And you don't really get free academies until you're like 13, 14 with development academies, which is, there's only so many of them, and some kids are late bloomers, which I myself was in that aspect. And it's so hard for these kids to actually be able to develop within a game that honestly has given me so much. I know so many people that love it. It truly is difficult, the cost of playing soccer, because as he said, it's a multi-billion-dollar business, and the youth soccer scene is so corrupt within this country to where they try to exploit that money out of the youth. Instead of focusing on development, there's a money-making model, which is different from overseas, which is why kids, like so many other sports, are easier to get into, basketball, football. A lot of times they're a lot cheaper. But Inverso, his initiative, if it could go nationwide, honestly, in my opinion, fixes this issue flat out. It gives kids who are from communities who need it a way to play soccer. And also, he told me he has teamed up with the coach at Princeton, who's one of his good friends. He actually served as an assistant there back in the 80s. And he said kids from Princeton will now be tutoring, hopefully, kids within this Mooch soccer program and giving them, the effects of that elite education, hopefully. And he told me he wants his players, which they haven't volunteered in a few years, but he said that's changing. That's changing this year as soon as possible, as soon as they could open. He wants his players in contact with, Mooch soccer players, these kids from Trenton that they are working with, as mentors, as aides, as people that they can rely on, as people who could really navigate themselves through youth, through teenage years, as they enter into high school. And hopefully some of those kids even get college opportunities where they can use soccer as a way to get somewhere with their life.
Yeah, it's a fantastic movement, and I think that it's really, really going to make a huge impact, not just at Rider and with his players and Princeton and with the players there and with riders players going over there to tutor and stuff like that, and the students over at Princeton, like you mentioned before, with Rider, Penn State, Northwestern, all of them are nationwide. And I think even as a goalie myself, Shaun, I didn't play at that high of a level, but I only played up to EDP. But either way, I can know that I know the same experiences that some people can go through. As I wasn't the most athletic person playing soccer, and people would make fun of you all the time, especially if you came from a not so fortunate area or a not so fortunate family. You would get lambasted for it. And I there really needs to be some sort of change, and I'm very, very happy that Inverso's doing it. Then moving on now from some more serious topics to some more uplifting ones. We talked about the MAC news a little bit with the start dates, but there was some more news on it this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's everything's starting to fall into place, and everything's a fluid situation right now. One thing that I'm sure many people want to hear is, unfortunately, there will not be any fans until December 23rd, which is a couple days before the holiday break. Or actually, we'd
already be home at that point.
Yeah, we would already be home on that point. So it's really to protect the athletes, and so after that, it would be maybe 50 people in an arena, whatever state guidelines allow for. And the first conference game, at least for the men, would be on December 8th. Second one being December 11th. They want to keep, Commissioner Enzer told me that they want to keep that Tuesday, Friday model to protect the ESPNU contracts they have for the upcoming season. The women would play on Wednesday, Saturday. So whoever's covering men's basketball is going to have to deadline right a couple days on a Tuesday. But I don't know if either of us would be opposed to that, because I'm sure we're just desperate to go to cover a live sporting event. Definitely. Last sporting events I covered was March 12th, 2020. God knows how many days ago. Yeah, so no fans until December 23rd, and they're gonna have those days in between of without games for testing results. Hopefully, they can get some rapid tests that will produce results 72 hours before game time. And yeah, I think both teams are coming into the season really new. The women brought in 4 or 5 recruits. They lost 6 seniors, including Stella Johnson, who is the greatest Rider women's basketball player. Greatest Rider basketball player. Forget men's and women. She's the greatest Rider basketball player ever, period, the end. Let's make something very, very clear. She's the greatest, period, the end. And unfortunately, she lost her season came to a close in the WNBA with the Washington Mystics yesterday, who I think they got beat at the last second by Phoenix. I didn't watch the entire game, I heard they got beat on a last second shot. Yeah. But back to the MAC at least. So it's going to be encouraging to have 20 conference games. Those are really the biggest things that they want to keep in place. All leading up to the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference tournament, March 9th to March 13th at Boardwalk Hall in Atlantic City, New Jersey. So hopefully everything stays in place, to be honest with you. And like Commissioner Enzer, and I'm sure a lot of people, I'm cautiously optimistic, but we're also realistic. Not everything's going to work out. There will be some hiccups. There will probably be a game played within one of those weeks in February. I think it was the 3rd week. Don't quote me on that. Maybe either the 3rd week or February 23rd, or that week. So I anticipate a game being played in there, and it's good that they have that, because it gives them a buffer to at least continue to have the season without too many disruptions to the schedule, because that's really the most important thing, on top of players' health, obviously.
Yeah, they've also really taken their time to figure all this stuff out and to really have a game plan in place for what they want to do. And I think the time that, like, the amount of time they took to release all this stuff, it served them well to where they have a really, really good idea of what could happen, and if there's any hiccups or stuff like that, what they're going to be able to do with that built-in week, which I think is a really, really smart idea. And like you said, Dylan, I think there's at least probably going to be one game played that week. There's always going to be hiccups, and we've seen even with like the NBA, the NHL, which had bubbles, and even though colleges aren't doing that, they're still going to be traveling. They're still going to be moving. Players are still going to be moving around, going to classes, especially in the spring, to where if Ryder at least goes back to on-campus classes instead of all online, it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen with kids going to class and kids traveling for sports and stuff like that.
Well, listen, I mean, like that, the period that I want to call the golden window is the period of time in between semesters, what we all know is J term, that January term, from when the spring semester, from when the fall semester ends to the spring, that day in like a normal situation, pandemic aside, there's at least 8 to 10 games played in that window between both sports, I guess, men's basketball, women's basketball. So that's a real bulk of your season to be played there. Usually you have the first conference game in there. So that's a very important period of time that, health officials are, almost starting to say is the time when we need to be the most careful. And for people not to be on campus, even though we are de-densified, pretty much, that opportunity in between semesters is going to be very, very important, and we got to really be safe there if we want the basketball season to go on as we want it to. Listen, college basketball is going to happen. College basketball is going to be played. We will have a March Madness tournament in March or whenever if they decide to move it, but that's the NCAA's biggest revenue generator. Probably generates about 80 to 85% of their revenue. Don't quote me on that number, but it's a damn big chunk, grossing at over $1 billion, guys. Over $1 billion with a B. So they're going to have that. And then that money trickles down to the other conferences to run their other tournaments. So they need to have it. They can't sustain 2 years without a March Madness tournament.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing, at least for college basketball, is whether they're going to have it in March or if they're going to push it back. Depending on what happens, I would say through December and January, they would probably make their decision around then. At least to me, they probably would decide like the first week of February whether they're going to have it or not. And
everything's so fluid.
Yeah.
It really is so fluid. We could say early February, we could say March. This in 2020, the MAC tournament was held March 10th to the 14th. We're holding that around the same time this year, March 9th to the 13th. Everything's just so fluid right now, especially in the area that the MAC is located, because we are a, I guess, healthy, you could say, geographical region with all 11 schools being located in New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut. And one thing that is worth mentioning is with non-conference play, they're hoping to get in 4 to 5 games, a maximum of 6, I believe, would be allowed. But they're encouraging, the MAC's encouraging its schools to schedule those games for regional opponents. We're not going to see Ryder play at Arizona State like they did last year. We're not going to see them play Wisconsin.
Or Ole Miss that was scheduled this year.
Ole Miss, that game might still be on the schedule, but who knows? They might be able to try to fit something in there. But, the thing we have to be careful about is the quarantine restrictions for each state. If you go somewhere and then come back to New Jersey, are you going to have to quarantine for 14 days? That could knock out a game or two, which they cannot afford to do.
Yeah, I think with the rules for the quarantine I don't know if they're going to keep them the same for for the sports teams, because I've seen reports to where, at least in the southern U.S., there are teams playing where if they're not in the same state for 24 hours, they are okay to go back to the school. I've seen reports of that. I'm not sure exactly how true it is. I've heard that is what's going on, but I don't know whether they would do that here or not, because there were a lot more cases in New York and New Jersey, as we were in the top 5, and I think still are in the top 5 for most cases reported total. But it's going to be really interesting to see what Ryder can do, and like what the game situations are going to be, if they're going to play regional, how many games they're going to play against certain teams, and what the quarantine policies are going to be like. But either way, that's going to wrap it up here for the first episode of the sports section here with the Rider News. My name's Carolo Pascale, here along with Dylan Manfre and Shaun Chornobroff. Have a good one, everybody.